Rain lashed against the cobblestones. The night was a canvas of shadows. A dense fog rolled through the streets, swallowing the gaslight's feeble glow. Jonathan Graves, a historian with a thirst for the unknown, found himself drawn to a dimly lit storefront. Above the door, a faded sign creaked in the wind. Eldritch and Sons Rare Tomes. Jonathan hesitated. The name sent a shiver down his spine. He pulled his coat tighter against the cold and stared at the rain-streaked window. The bookstore beckoned, promising forgotten lore and whispered secrets. It was a siren's call, and he was powerless to resist. Jonathan took a deep breath and pushed the heavy oak door open. The hinges groaned like a restless spirit. He stepped inside, leaving the storm at bay. The air within was thick with the scent of aged paper and something ancient, something unsettling. The bookstore was a labyrinth of towering bookshelves. They reached towards the high ceiling, disappearing into the shadows. Each shelf was crammed with leather-bound volumes, their titles obscured by years of dust. The air hung heavy with the weight of forgotten knowledge. Jonathan ran his fingers along the spines of the books. Each one felt like a portal to another time, another world. He could almost feel the whispers of history swirling around him. The silence of the bookstore was broken only by the soft patter of rain against the windows. A sense of unease crept over Jonathan as he ventured deeper into the store. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Every shadow seemed to writhe. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like a footstep. At the back of the store, Jonathan discovered a small, dusty table. A single oil lamp cast a flickering light on its surface. And there, lying open, was a book unlike any he had ever seen. It was bound in what appeared to be human skin, its pages filled with strange symbols and diagrams. Jonathan's heart pounded in his chest. He couldn't resist the urge to reach out and touch the book. Its leather was cold and strangely smooth. A sense of dread washed over him as his fingers brushed against its surface. He knew he shouldn't open it, but some unseen force compelled him. With trembling hands, Jonathan carefully lifted the cover. The pages were filled with faded ink, the writing swirling and intricate. He recognized some of the symbols as ancient runes, but others were completely foreign. The language seemed to writhe before his eyes, whispering of forbidden knowledge. As Jonathan began to read, the air around him grew heavy. The shadows in the bookstore seemed to deepen, pressing in on him. He could feel a presence, cold and malevolent, watching his every move, but he couldn't stop reading. The words held him captive, drawing him deeper into their web of darkness. The book spoke of a time before time, when the world was ruled by beings of immense power. It told of their rituals and sacrifices, of their hunger for dominion over the mortal realm. Jonathan was both terrified and exhilarated by what he read. It was a glimpse into a hidden history, a dark underbelly of the world he thought he knew. As he turned the brittle pages, Jonathan felt a cold draft on his neck. He looked up, expecting to see a window ajar, but all the windows were closed tight. The feeling of being watched intensified. He could almost hear whispers echoing through the stacks, pronouncements in a language he couldn't comprehend. One symbol in particular caught his eye. It was a quill with an eye staring out from the nib. It was repeated throughout the book, appearing like a sinister watermark. Each time he looked at it, Jonathan felt a chill run down his spine. The eye seemed to follow his every move, as if alive. Section 5. The Eye That Sees. Jonathan slammed the book shut. The air in the bookstore felt suddenly oppressive, as if the very walls were closing in on him. He had to get out, escape the suffocating darkness of the place. But as he turned to leave, he noticed something strange. The symbol of the quill and eye, the one that had haunted the pages of the book, was now etched into the palm of his hand. It glowed faintly, pulsating with an eerie light. Jonathan tried to wipe it away, but it wouldn't budge. It felt like it was burned into his skin. Panic welled up inside him. He had stumbled into something ancient and evil, something that had marked him as its own. The bookstore, once a place of wonder and intrigue, now felt like a prison. His heart pounded in his ears as he stumbled towards the door. Jonathan grasped the doorknob, but it wouldn't turn. It was as if the door itself was refusing to let him leave. Fear gnawed at his insides. He was trapped, alone in the darkness with something unspeakable. Jonathan turned back to the table, drawn by an unseen force. The book lay open, beckoning him closer. The strange symbols on the page seemed to writhe and shift, forming words in his mind. He didn't understand the language, yet he understood the message. "Knowledge comes at a price," the book whispered. Jonathan's breath caught in his throat. The voice wasn't coming from the book, he realized. It was coming from inside his head. His own thoughts were replaced by the whispers of something ancient and powerful. He tried to pull away, but the book held him captive. The eye and the symbol seemed to bore into his soul, reading his deepest fears and desires. He was trapped, not just in the bookstore, but in a web of ancient magic he couldn't comprehend. As Jonathan stared at the book, the ink on the pages began to stir. It swirled and pulsed, forming tendrils that reached out towards him. He cried out, trying to pull away, but it was too late. The ink enveloped his hand, seeping into his skin like a living thing. He screamed again, a primal sound born of fear and desperation. The bookstore seemed to warp around him, the shelves twisting into grotesque shapes. The air grew thick and heavy, making it difficult to breathe. The ink flowed up his arm, spreading across his chest like a dark, venomous stain. It burned like fire, searing his flesh and bone. Jonathan collapsed to the floor, writhing in agony as the ink continued its insidious spread. Through the haze of pain, Jonathan saw a figure emerge from the shadows. It was a tall, gaunt man with eyes like burning coals. He wore a long black coat that seemed to absorb the light. Jonathan knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone that this was Eldritch. "You have touched what you should not have touched," Eldritch said, his voice a dry rasp that echoed through the bookstore. "And now you will pay the price." Jonathan tried to speak, to plead for mercy, but no words came out. The ink had spread throughout his body, silencing his thoughts, stealing his very essence. He could only watch in horror as Eldritch approached, his face twisted into a cruel smile. Eldritch placed a cold, bony hand on Jonathan's forehead. Jonathan felt a searing pain, like his mind was being ripped apart, and then everything went black. The next morning, the rain had stopped. The fog had lifted, revealing a city bathed in the soft glow of dawn. Inside Eldritch and Son's rare tomes, the books stood silent on their shelves. The only sign that anything was amiss was a single book lying open on a dusty table. The book was bound in what appeared to be human skin, its pages filled with strange symbols and diagrams, and on the floor beside the table lay a hat, a simple fedora, discarded and forgotten. The symbol of the quill and eye, once etched into the book's pages and the palm of a man's hand, was gone. But somewhere, unseen, it watched and waited for its next victim. For knowledge, once tasted, is a thirst that can never be quenched.